Good morning, I'm Giovanni Carmine Costabile, and today I will tell you about Gandalf, Wormtongue, and the Owl and the Nightingale. In the Two Towers, Wormtongue welcomes Gandalf in Meduseld in terms that cannot be defined as very warm. Gandalf is accused of being Stormcrow and ill news, and to bring worse evils every time he shows up. And being so accused, Gandalf replies in a very powerful way, so that we can see him as the White Wizard after he returned from death in his fight with the Balrog in Moria. In the Middle English bird debate, The Owl and the Nightingale, we find a similar scene when the Nightingale accuses the Owl of being a budel, announcing Unwreste Rune. So he's accused of being a bringer of evil tidings, always speaking of bad things. And the owl replies in a very effective way that reminds one of Gandalf. And the owl questions the Nightingale's right of accusing him by saying that only a priest may speak similar charges. So we can connect Tolkien's text with the Owl and the Nightingale because Tolkien was a scholar of the poem, and he taught the text in his lectures throughout his life. But probably nobody ever brought up the association between the two texts because nightingales are rather connected with Luthien, and this discourages connecting the bird with Wormtongue. Anyway, Tolkien's inspiration might have been dialogical rather than characterial. The Owl and the Nightingale is a bird debate poem written in early Middle English in a southwestern dialogue. It runs about 1800 lines, and it is dated by internal evidence to about 1200. Even though both manuscripts preserving it, Jesus College, Oxford manuscript 29, and British Library Cotton manuscript Caligula A9, are dated to the 13th century. It is the earliest example in Middle English of its genre. In the poem, the Nightingale starts by criticizing the appearance of the owl, saying that it looks ugly and dirty. The Nightingale replies by saying that they should rather ask for Nicholas of Guildford's opinion after the suggestion of the owl that the debate should be conducted in a civil and reasonable manner. The Nightingale insulted the owl for its annoying calls, and he said that the owl stays awake at night because it has no self-control over its vices. The owl's reply is that the Nightingale's calls are boring and excessive, and after that the Nightingale says that it is the owl's song that is an harbinger of sadness, while its own song rather brings joy. And the owl still counters the Nightingale's statement by saying that it is simply due to the fact that the song of the Nightingale brings joy is only due to the fact that the nightingales sing during summer, and in that time men are filled with lust. In the in the following, the owl says that it is a praiseworthy bird because he keeps churches free of rats. And the nightingale replies that he too is a useful bird because it encourages devotees to always remain faithful to their beliefs by singing. And the owl replies that he inspires people to repent of their sins. But the nightingale says that the fact that the owl also brought up that the nightingale by singing could inspire women to commit adultery is due to the fact that women are fragile, and anyway the fault lies with men because they take advantage of the naivety of girls. The nightingale is very angry at this point, and he says that the owl is only useful after his death, since he can be used as a scarecrow. And the owl replies that in this way it can help humans even after death. At this point, they threaten each other, the two birds threaten each other until Ran intervenes, calming them both. And the two birds decide to go to Portsam in Dorset to ask for Nicholas's advice. Nicholas of Guildford, for his important role in the poem, is generally considered to be the author. Now, debate poetry is a genre that was widespread in the ancient Middle East. It is found in the Hebrew Bible, in the Book of Job, and also in Sumerian literature in Persia. It was widespread in the Arsacid and Sassanid periods. That means from the 3rd century before Common Era to the 7th century of the Common Era, but also throughout the Persian Middle Ages. In Arabic literature, an instance, for example, of debate poetry is found in the Abbasid poet Al-Jaiz, who wrote debates between the belly and the back, young male lovers and women, and blacks and whites. While in Europe, debate poetry as a genre is found especially in the Carolingian Renaissance, and one instance is the Conflictus Veris and Iamis, the contention of spring and winter, that is attributed to Alcuin. In classical literature, one finds Virgil's Eclogues, where the debates between shepherds are found, and in the Middle Ages, one finds in Middle English also the 14th century debate of the body and soul, that is a theological debate concerning the responsibility of damnation and whether it should be attributed to the body or the soul. And also another case of debate poetry is concerned with love, and an example can be found in French in Christine de Pisan's Le Débat des Amants, the debate of the two lovers. And the Owl and the Nightingale features examples of flighting that are the harangues defined by this term from Old English, and the verb meaning to scold. The term is still used in northern England and in Scotland, and it was especially widespread in Scotland in the Middle Ages, and bird debates can be also found in Middle English, in other examples where the nightingale is also found. For example, in the 13th century, there is a lyric called The Thrush and the Nightingale, where the Virgin Mary is stated to be the reason why there are faithful wives and good women. But also in the 14th century, one finds the cuckoo and the nightingale, and in the 15th century, the merle and the nightingale by Dunbar. And in Geoffrey Chaucer's The Parliament of Fowls, an owl and the nightingale also are mentioned among other birds. Flighting is not necessarily concerned with birds anyway, because it is a ritual exchange of insults in poetic forms that can be found in Old English, Middle English, Celtic and Norse literature, involving mythical or historical characters. And the insults can be extreme provocations, and especially common are the accusations of cravenness or sexual perversion. In Norse literature, one finds flighting in Lokasenna and Harbard's Fjord, and in Beowulf, Beowulf himself and Umferth also confront each other in an exchange of flighting. In Irish, these form of insults are called IMRB, if I pronounce it correctly. That means counter boasting. And an example is the hero Cuchulainn in Timebok Ilne. In Scotland, there is, in the 15th century, William Dunbar's The Flighting of Dunbar and Kennedy. Also in Shakespeare, one finds flighting in Troilo and Cressida between two Greek characters. And indeed, in Greece, flighting is found in the Iliad itself. Also in Arabian poetry, one finds the poetical genre of Nakahid. And in Japan, one has the in Japan, one has the verse called Aikai no Renga. Tolkien, as we already pointed out, knew very well the Owl and the Nightingale, starting from April 1915, when it took notes on the Owl and the Nightingale, and especially its vocabulary. Jason Fisher said that Attercop in line 600 is the source of Bilbo's cry of Attercop, Attercop in The Hobbit in Mirkwood. Skull and Hammond also testified that either in 1927 or in early 1928, Tolkien brought up with city onions the fact that in The Owl and the Nightingale was found a phrase that Onions was writing about for the Review of English Studies. And on 8 April 1932, C.S. Lewis testified to his brother Warren that he was reading Tolkien's translation of The Owl and the Nightingale, a translation that was never published in Tolkien's life and is still unpublished. And on 28 April 1967, Tolkien replied to John Layard that he had given up the task of translating The Owl and the Nightingale. Tolkien taught the debate poem in 1953, 1954, 1955, 1956, as far as we know. And he owned, as attested by Ronzo Cilli, the 1907 edition by Wells, and he consulted the 1838 edition by Stevenson and the 1960 edition by Stanley. Shippey argued that Tolkien identified with the owl, with the author of The Owl and the Nightingale, Nicholas Guilford, because of a line that is found in the title page of the Notion Club papers. B.S. Benedict attests that he attended Tolkien's lectures on The Owl and the Nightingale in 1953-1954, and he wrote in Amonen that the lectures took the listeners in a wide sweep through the whole gamut of writing, and Tolkien is attested to have defined The Owl and the Nightingale as one of the great humorous poems of European literature. So there is no doubt about Tolkien's familiarity with the text. And this can be seen in The Lord of the Rings when Gandalf comes to Meduseld. Wormtongue says that his welcome is doubtful because he is a herald of woe, and troubles follow him like crows, and he brings every time he shows up evils worse than before, and calls him Stormcrow. In The Owl and the Nightingale, one finds the owl being similarly accused by the nightingale. Indeed, the owl was called the prophet of misery or propheta miseriae in Alanus de Insulis, the Planctu Naturae. So the nightingale says that it is right for people to be hostile to the owl because it always talks about people's misfortune, and it is a bringer of bad luck, for example, loss of property or some friend's ruin, and an advance in army, thieves, or the fact the population will suffer of an epidemic among cattle, or the fact that the wife will lose her husband, or quarrels and strifes. I am quoting from the translation by Bella Miller. In The Lord of the Rings, in the following, Wormtongue says that Gandalf comes in a time when bitter tidings accompany his arrival. In fact, Theodred, the son of Theoden, was slain, and the Dark Lord is staring in the east, and Eomer cannot be trusted. So Wormtongue asks Gandalf why should he be welcome, since he is Master Stormcrow, Latspell, ill news, and as such an ill guest. Similarly, the nightingale accused the owl of being always singing about people suffering and always foretelling disaster, because it is a town crier, deserving to be cursed, announcing misfortune, always bringing bad news, and always talking about evil things. Even comes as far as saying that God should be his enemy. Gandalf's reply is that there are two ways in which a man may come with evil tidings. He can be a worker of evil, or he may come to bring aid. In a similar way, when the owl replies to the nightingale, it says that it quotes a saying by King Alfred, that if you see a threat before it has arrived, it will lose almost all its strength. In a similar way, heavy blows lose their power if one is on the lookout for them, and an arrow will miss its mark if you watch how it flies from the string. If any man runs into trouble, why should he blame his distress on the owl? Even if the owl sees his arm coming to him in advance, that does not mean that the arm comes from the owl. Later, Gandalf encourages Theoden. He says that Theoden should take courage and that he will not find better help than his, because he has no counsel to give to those that despair, but he can give counsel to him and speak words that are not for all ears. And he tells him, too long have you sat in shadows and trusted to twisted tales and crooked promptings such as Wormtongues. Also, the owl says, when I see that some disaster is approaching people, I cry out loudly enough and tell them often enough that they should protect themselves, since they are threatened by serious harm. So also the owl points out that it means well and it comes to aid people, and that is the reason why it sings about bad things. He sings to them because I want them to know that something bad is hanging over them when I look at them, it says. And Wormtongue's reply to Gandalf is that apart from bringers of evil and people who come to aid, there is also a third kind of people, pickers of bones, meddlers in other men's sorrows, carrion fowl that grow fat on war. And he asks Gandalf, what aid have you ever brought, Stormcrow, and what aid do you bring now? 3 ragged wanderers in grey, and you yourself the most beggar-like. In the beginning of The Owl and the Nightingale had accused the owl of being ugly to look at, hideous in all sorts of ways, and that his body is squat, his neck is scrawny, his head is bigger than the rest, and his eyes are black as skull and also big, and his glare seems like you would like to bite to death everything that it can strike, and his beak is hard and sharp and curved as a hook. So in both cases, the appearance of both Gandalf and his companions and the owl is questioned because it has a humble appearance. But Gandalf replies in a very powerful way. He says, I quote, "The wise speak only of what they know, Grima, son of Galmod. A witless worm have you become. Therefore be silent and keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. I have not passed through fire and death to bandy crooked words with a serving man till the night lightning falls." End quote. And even the owl has a very strong answer to give to the Nightingale. "What?" she said. "Are you ordained, or are you cursing quiet without priestly authority? Because I'm sure that you're doing a priest's job. I don't know if you were ever a priest, I don't know if you can sing mass, but you do know a fair amount about cursing. But it's because of your old envy that you curse me once again." End quote. So the similarity between the two texts is undoubtable, and yet it has not been pointed out until now, as far as I know, because Tolkien associated nightingales with Luthien. And not only that, the earliest mention of nightingales in Tolkien's writing comes in the early poem You and Me and the Cottage of Lost Play, dedicated to Edith, where one finds the lines, "While all about the nightingales for singing in the trees." In the link between the Cottage of Lost Play and the music of the Ainur, Ariel listened to the Song of a Nightingale before going to sleep, and the song inspires his dreaming, where he hears a music thinner and more pure than any he heard before, and it was full of longing. Also in the Lost Road, one of the words that Alboin remembers in the Elvish tongue is Lomelinde, meaning nightingale. And as I was saying, nightingales are associated with Luthien, but also with Melian. And so Tolkien's notion of the bird was only positive and linked to longing and love. Michael Flowers even went as far as to say that the bird could have a totemic importance for Tolkien. The nightingales and their song are generally associated with love. It is not just Tolkien associating the bird with love. An example is a lyric by Mactild, writing that the nightingale cannot help singing, for she sparkles with love in her whole being. If these were taken from her, she would die. The nightingale is also associated with the Virgin Mary, with the devout soul, and with Jesus Christ. And an example is found in the Altfranzösisches Wörterbuch by Tober Lomatsch, where it is written Rossignol as the Marie, plus noble ne vie en ta vie. The nightingale is Our Lady Mary, the noblest you may see in your life. Also, Harry Hawkins in 1633 says that the nightingale can be associated with Mary. And in Van der Wielen, one finds it written that the nightingale avoided the homes of man and died in woods and thickets, and so suggests shyness in a way that can be associated with maidenhood. The nightingale is identified with woman in Ovid's Metamorphosis because Philomela was transformed into the bird after being raped. And this is a work that many people in the Middle Ages were familiar with, so much so that the word Philomela was utilized as a synonym for Lucinia, the classical female Latin word for nightingale. Chaucer mentions this myth in Troilus and Criseyde, and Gower turns the Nightingale song into a lament over lost virginity by association with Ovid. In Gower, one also finds the nightingale singing in the woods when Actaeon sees the goddess Diana bathing. The eyes of the lovers can be compared to nightingales. In the 15th century, the Sultan of Babylon. And Atto says that the nightingale was a popular erotic symbol in Europe. In fact, Gower says that nightingales and lovers do not sleep at night. The two lovers in the fourth tale of the fifth day in Boccaccio's Decameron make the male nightingale sing time and time again. And the very name of the nightingale means night singer in Old English, where it is called ancient evening poet, or as it is attested by Gallinek Shellekens. In Chaucer's Parliament of Fowls, the nightingale is mentioned among the birds of love, right after the sparrow, that is Venus' son. This means that Tolkien had no reason to connect the nightingale with Wormtongue, but simply he produced the contention between the bird characters in the Middle English poem, not their bird identities. He was interested in flighting, and this confirms the idea, even though it is Gandalf who is associated with a bird, and is associated with a crow, not with owls. Sorry. Tolkien was an expert in the Middle English The Owl and the Nightingale, having translated and taught it throughout his life. So when he wrote The Two Towers, he was inspired by The Owl and the Nightingale in writing the debate between Gandalf and Wormtongue, when the latter accuses the former of being a bringer of evil news and to bring bad luck, while Gandalf replies by questioning Wormtongue's authority in a way that reminds a reader of the contention between the Owl and the Nightingale. Nonetheless, Tolkien did not associate Wormtongue with the Nightingale, because the Nightingale in Tolkien's works is rather connected with longing and love in a positive manner, and it is Wormtongue, and it is Gandalf, not Wormtongue, that is associated with a bird, and it is a crow, not an owl. Thank you.